the gun. Manning lets it fly. It's caught by Thomas. There's the record for Peyton Manning.
Saludos and salutations, Broncos country, and welcome to another exciting episode of Broncos Talk. I am your host, Trevathan Diaz, and joining me, as always, to my right is at Richie. Richie, how you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing well. I've had lots of time to catch up on both our opponent-to-be and re-review the Browns game, so I'm ready to go.
As am I. I am ready to go, Rich. But before we talk about the recap of what happened last week against the Browns, guys, just want to go over a couple of things with you before we begin today's action-packed show. I just want to remind you guys that if you're not part of this MHRT network, then you're missing out on a lot. So let me just remind you guys that Broncos Talk goes live every single Tuesday at 7654 with myself and at Richie. And if you want more Broncos content, we got you covered. We have the MHRT podcast show. It's the flagship show with myself, the boss Mundungus, Glenn Hauser, and Mr. Boggins. And that airs every single Thursday at 7654. And then on Friday, we have the Nothing Rhymes With podcast with our good friends Johnny and Isaiah, and they're on 7654. And also, we have the new program that's part of the MHRT network called The Neighborhood, which is our pregame show that airs just before every single Broncos game. So make sure you guys hit that thumbs up, get live notifications so you never miss a single action-packed moment. And also, we would just like to thank everybody out there for helping us reach our 400 subscriber count. Guys, thank you so much. We are really appreciative, and we are thankful that you guys are always happy to come back and listen to what we have to say, our opinions and our venting and whatever it is. And we couldn't have gotten to this point without you guys. So thank you guys so much. And we're still climbing. So this isn't over, folks. We're still going to the top. We're going to try to reach as many levels as we can together as Broncos country. So
absolutely. And the more times you retweet our posts on Twitter for when our shows go live, share out to those that you know in Broncos country. If you're on forums and whatnot, we always recommend and appreciate anyone bringing us up in those forums, because we love to hear from everyone we possibly can in Broncos country, and we hope they like to come back too. So thank you very much, and we appreciate it, and here's for more.
Very much agreed, my friend. But guys, let's get to today's topic, which is the Browns game that happened this past Thursday. And expectations were pretty high going into this game. And what I mean by that is we were really hoping that the Broncos would be able to turn around even on such short notice against a team that was missing their starting quarterback, missing one of their offensive linemen, missing both of their running backs, and they just seemed like a team on a crutch, basically. And for everything that happened, unfortunately, Denver was not able to take advantage of any of those aspects, and it would seem more like a revenge game for one Case Keenum. So my personal thoughts into this is, if we ever thought Vic Fangio's seat was on fire after that game, there were literally flames coming from underneath his seat or under his podium or wherever he was during that game. Because, Rich, there is no safety net. Okay, let's just get that out of the way, folks. Last year, when all this stuff was happening, when the team wasn't playing very well, we were able to say, oh, it's because of COVID and there was injured players and whatnot. That was Vic Fangio's safety net. This year, can't say any of that. Even though COVID is still around, but it's not as big of an issue in terms of the football world as it was last year. And the injuries, while we do have some players that are injured, they're not on complete IR, even though we do have 3 current IR players that are done for the season. But with that, Rich, this should have been the game where the hard decision should have been made. Teddy Bridgewater going out there definitely did not look like he was at 100%. It looked like he was trying to speed through his reads, and he was forcing the ball into coverages and into plays that, when you look back at it, made absolutely no sense at all.
I agree. Before we get going right into this, and I am absolutely excited to get into the details of the Browns game. Maybe we can start kicking us off with thanking everyone who's joining us live right now on the stream. We have Glenn. Thank you very much. Bree, always a pleasure having you on. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the support. We have Vic. Vic, I noticed the retweet there of the post when we went live. I really appreciate your support. We have the Whiz Kid in Landon Clark. We have Mobad in the house. Thank you very much for joining us. We have Mundungus Creevy, the boss man. And we have Johnny Baki. We have EJ also joining us live. KB82, the Mile High Prophet, the one and only. Avatar, who joined us nice and early, which was awesome. And if there's anyone else that is joining us after the fact, we thank you for joining us as well. With regards to the Browns game, I agree. I think that we all hoped as Broncos fans that Browns game was going to be at least something that we could look a little bit more competitive in, if not win, given the injuries that were on the Cleveland Browns side. Now, right around the time of when we went live on last week's pod, in our defense, when we kind of had our predictions and things like that, things were a little different on the Browns, and they started to get confirmation of two of their main playmakers at least coming back into the game on the offensive side of the ball with their two wideouts in Odell and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Number 80. So he was a really, really good player, both of those guys. And frankly, you need to put and focus on them. So unfortunately, with both of those guys returning, it really put an additional pressure on our Landry. Thank you very much. Landry coming back. It put some extra pressure on our secondary, which is already shown to be, I think, what most of us would not have expected coming into the season, almost a weak spot for our team, where I think we all expected that we had even some extraordinary depth on that team, or on that side of the ball on our team, which was hopefully going to be a strong suit, and really hasn't been. We've been really hit pretty hard with some passing yards against these past 3 games in a row. So what are your thoughts on that?
You know what? I was really hoping that Pat Shurmur would just come flying out of the gate with, some plays that we haven't seen, and just basically knowing that his job is on the line, especially after coming off of that game where there were people holding up fire Pat Shurmur banners. You would have thought that he would be in somewhere, coming up with creative plays, doing something that would help him find some initiative in trying to revamp this offense, Rich. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I mean, if people in Broncos country can see that Teddy Bridgewater was not 100%, was not playing like a normal vet should, that should have been a red flag for Pat Shurmur to put in Drew Lock. And even though Drew Lock wouldn't have been the most obvious answer to trying to beat the Cleveland Browns, he would have been the better option that Denver had going into that game. And he did kind of change up the plays a little bit, but then it kind of started to get a little bit repetitive. Like, we finally started to see screen passes, but then it was like somebody playing Madden who just tried to just use whatever screen pass was available if you did the Ask Madden option. That's what that felt like, because then it started to get a little bit repetitive. And then not only that, but the screen passes are better when your quarterback can read the defense and know that he can draw them in so that the pass can go even further. And that to me was just completely off topic or off page. But
I think what you're saying there is we threw screen passes for almost the sake of throwing a screen pass.
Yeah.
A properly run screen pass is designed in such a way that you almost lure the other team in to then maximize the yardage as a result of that screen pass. And I could not agree with that comment more. It's almost like Shurmur saying, wait, online they kept on saying that I should run screen passes. All right, here's one, go.
Yeah. And and this is also one of the big reasons that we're going to get to later on in the show, Rich, about why the Broncos did what they did. Huh?
Is Johnny yelling?
Well, he's a very energetic person.
Yes, let's just say yes.
So the Broncos just completely gashed in as a middle linebacker. I mean, Justin Sternad, I knew I wasn't expecting him to have like the most amazing game of his career, but I was expecting him to play a lot better than what he was playing in that one. And I know that they were rotating on the other side, but that game let everybody in Broncos country know, and hopefully the defensive coaches out there as well, just appreciate how much not having Honey Bear and Alexander Johnson out on the field. And the thing that sucks is that this is only week 7. The Broncos still have so many more games to go. And if those linemen cannot stop a third string running back, it just makes me shudder to think about the big name running backs that are going to come into Denver, or that Denver's going to in the coming weeks. And it's a big issue. So hopefully the moves that George Paton has done in the last day or so will help to kind of mend that wound, because there is no way that defense is already struggling as it is in the secondary. Now we're struggling with the interior line. So that's just a big problem going all the way. And the trade deadline is a week from today, Rich. So the Broncos still have time to make some necessary moves if they feel the need to. But the thing that needs to happen now is the Broncos team as a whole needs to turn around and start playing for the better, because there's no point in giving up draft picks and trading and doing all this stuff if the offense doesn't get any better, and if the defense doesn't play any better, and if we don't start winning games, because then it's going to get to a point where it's like, okay, well, you gave up draft picks, but you're not even going to make the playoffs. So it all goes to waste.
Yeah, I actually think that one thing we need to make a little bit of a decision now is, are we thinking we want to plan on retaining and keeping the Fangio defensive scheme? Because I actually think that a couple of our interior defensive linemen are better suited for a 4-3 rather than a 3-4. I know that he's a fan favorite, although I just don't think he particularly fits a Fangio scheme, and that's Draymond Jones. So if we wanted to look at pieces that we currently have, and if we actually want to turn things around either this season or looking ahead to 2022, where we can bring in a guy to maybe help this year and also help, the years to come, it is, what do we want to run? How do we want to look? What type of defense are we wanting to run? And I think one of the things that we've noticed in the last few games is they have run the ball all over us. And we started off so well against the run, and we were ranked, I think, within the top 3, if I'm not mistaken, for the first few games.
Mm-hmm.
And now we were just, we're free falling down that list right now, from what I could tell. So we need to shore up that interior. Mike Purcell has had a few good kind of spits and spurts in games, but he hasn't had that consistency that we were used to seeing from him when he was playing so well for us prior to him getting that contract. And those that are in behind him have not been able to step up to fill the void when they've been rotated in his place. So we really might want to look at an interior, that dead center guy that can chew up kind of the 2 blocks in that middle of the field. And, we can look at other teams. We can see if there's guys that are kind of coming to the back end of their contracts. But if we go that route, that might be the only way that we get a really quality guy, because another team may be willing to let them go if they don't want to re-sign them. But then you have to be mindful, A, why are they letting them go? And B, we also have to, it's true. And then B, we then have to think, are we willing to spend our, pretty healthy cap space that's coming into the 2022 season? Do we want to spend that cap space on re-signing them? Because that's what you'd ultimately need to do when you make trades like that.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back and agree with something that Glenn said, and I highlighted it here for our live audience, and that's basically the fact that George Paton is making moves and he's not giving up, which is great to see from your GM, but I don't really have an issue with George Paton. The only issue I probably would say with George Paton is the fact that he hasn't fired Pat Shurmur at this point. So, but I would have to think that there's going to be a point at this season where it's going to be where the Broncos are really, really teetering on the edge of, playoff contention, yes or no, where if Vic Fangio can't pull the trigger and let go of Pat Shurmur, then it's going to have to be George Paton that fires him. And then they'll probably roll the dice to see if they can hopefully do something better with one of the interim coaches, like we've talked about Mike Shula being a possible replacement at offensive coordinator. But something needs to happen, Rich, because the road for the Broncos isn't going to get any easier as we go along, especially after our bye week. It's, I wish I could say that the schedule gets a little bit easier, but it doesn't. We still have another upcoming matchup with the Chargers. We'll have both of our games against the Chiefs, who are not playing the best kind of football, but there's something about Patrick Mahomes that, he's got a streak against Denver. So we can't go into those games, just because they're playing like crap, that, just basically cocky, in other words, because we've done that these past 2 weeks. And so far we've lost to a Raiders team with no head coach, and we lost to a Browns team that had their like 1/4 of their star players out, and the Broncos still lost. So while I do commend Vic Fangio for holding kind of up, taking accountability for the losses so far, I don't feel that I don't know. It kind of felt to me like he was saying it because it's what people want to hear, but I don't think he said it like out of sincerity, because if he was really sincere, he'd have it sit down and be like, okay, well, you know what? Offense coordinator, you got to clean it up or you got to go, basically kind of give Broncos country out there some really, really deep meaning to say, hey, look, I'm serious. I love being a coach. I want to continue to coach here in Denver. He's got to do something, because not only has Vic Fangio lost the locker room, but he's starting to lose Broncos country as a whole.
So my only comment there is there is some reporting that came out today by actually a couple people. One of them we all know, who is pretty connected into the Denver media there, who came out with a comment today about the fact that in terms of where the order, like the hierarchy kind of fits in terms of who reports to who and whatnot, is a little different, I think, than a lot of what Broncos country thought. And that was that Ellis and Fangio kind of equally have Peyton and Vic kind of reporting through them. So any firing of Vic in particular would have to come from both Ellis and Elway in kind of a mutual agreement of one another. So I thought that was a rather interesting thing that was kind of reported or came out today. It confirmed a little bit what I thought originally, in terms of I thought the structure might have been something like that, because that's probably why Fangio is still around even after last year, is because of that general reporting structure. But then it does make me wonder, if that is the reporting structure with Vic, how much power does Vic actually have over the hiring and the firing, if that is in fact the hierarchical structure within the Broncos organization, to make that executive decision like most head coaches in the NFL have? Does he even have that executive power to just outright fire Shurmur? And if you have the, Joe Ellis and Elway kind of co-overseeing both the GM and the head coach, if there's a similar kind of web that's involved there with regards to the offensive coordinator, then that could really be preventing kind of some of the moves that you're referring to and implying, which, by the way, I don't disagree with, because something's got to give. We've seen enough of Shurmur, in my opinion, at this point, to say we've seen what he's going to be. I also posted an average of his offensive ranking when he first joined the Denver Broncos on my Twitter. So that's going pretty far back now. But his average offensive ranking was somewhere in the 26 out of 32 in terms of his average when you average over the course of his career. So he has not had a particularly good offensive ranking as a track record over the course of his career, in terms of offensive rankings. So this really didn't come as a shock to me that his offense doesn't look spectacular, because his history, which is long and storied, has not been spectacular, generally speaking, for his career. And like some coaches, he has had rare outliers where he was ranked in the top 10, but most of his career has been bottom quarter at best.
You know what? I'll be honest with you. When I heard about the Zach Wilson injury, the first thing that came to my mind was the fact that I really thought the Broncos front office, if they got a phone call from the Jets saying, hey, look, we'll give you a draft pick for Drew Lock or something, I honestly thought they were going to move him, because the Jets, even though, and it's really weird that the Jets, a team that got blown out by the Patriots and doesn't even look like they're going to be even in the playoff contention race at this point in time, still went out and got brought back Joe Flacco. So the fact that the New York Jets are still out there making moves and still trying to win games, really, when I thought about that, kind of really pissed me off. That the fact that I felt like the Broncos, and this was before Peyton made these roster moves. So that kind of pissed me off, because I'm like, if the Jets can go out there and try to make a move and, stay in some type of relevancy, even if they weren't able to go out and get an Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson per se, that how could the Broncos just be sitting there at 3-4? And, at this point, we're the laughing stock of the NFL, because, everybody's already heard the jokes about going 3-0. We're in the same category with the Panthers. And as much as I really wanted Denver to kind of get ahead of that, they took just one giant backflip backwards. So, this has got to change. And we're so used to how John Elway used to do things that I kind of forgot for a second that John Elway wasn't in charge, until I had to remember, like, oh yeah, it's George Payton. So Payton, if he is his first year as GM, he needs to start holding people accountable. He needs to, if it's the coaches have to be held accountable. If it's the defense has to just kind of basically put the blame where it has to be, find a way to fix it. And so far, with these roster moves that he's made so far at inside linebacker, it looks like it's a good temporary fix, Rich, but I don't think it's a permanent fix in terms of the long run, especially if the Broncos do happen to find a way to turn things around and make it into the playoffs as a wild card, and then you start really playing the really hard teams, especially teams that we lost to, like the Browns or the Ravens or the Steelers, teams like that. So it just needs to happen, and it needs to happen now.
So we made some changes. So if we end up doing what you just said with regards to turning things around, first off, I'm not fully convinced that George Payton has as much control over the roster and the team as you. I think that, given what I said earlier, and I heard like just how tight knit George Payton is and Vic, and it's just like it's a weird web. So I'm not fully convinced that George Payton has that full autonomy over the roster as you. I believe that Elway, because Payton directly reports through to Elway, I still think he probably has a little bit more say than I think we're willing to admit or even know. Now, that being said, when we look ahead to the moves that were made just recently, I'm actually not upset about those at all. I mean, I think the Broncos needed serviceable inside linebackers in particular, given the fact that we have, it's either 4 or 5, I have to double check my notes, that are like IR, which is ridiculous. Last year we were pulling guys out of the stands to play cornerback for us and signing guys off of practice squads that were undrafted free agents. Actually, I'll be honest, a couple of them actually look pretty good, but I mean, that's neither here nor there. The thing with us, though, is that we're now basically in that same position in our linebacking core, is we're 5 deep or 4 deep or something like that in the inside linebacking core. I'll be honest, there was a couple guys that played last game, and I didn't even realize they went out, because I'm just so used to seeing guys get pulled out of games and then thrown onto the bench in the stretchers. And then we have another couple guys on the outside linebackers that have now been injured as well. We have Aaron Patrick, and for those who don't know who that is, that's the guy that literally is a mirror image of DeMarcus Ware. He even wore 94, which was just bizarre. It played mind tricks on me when I was seeing him out there. But we have real issues in terms of the linebackers on injured reserve. Yeah, six linebackers in IR. And that's a big deal. That's huge. I mean, you can't have both of your starting inside linebackers on IR and expect to see no drop off in play. There's a reason why you named people your starters. Now, I think we struggled in certain aspects with our starting inside linebackers anyway. I think that you ended up with coverage issues whenever people were, say, throwing on Alexander Johnson, because he is not the fastest guy in the world. He was much better against the run, for example, just due to his physical size. He's a very, very large individual, and that's great. But, we're now seeing Strnad coming in, and if we're talking about the Browns game, that Case Keenum play where Case basically bulldozed Strnad was probably one of the worst inside linebacking plays that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, that was embarrassing.
That's you have to literally be walking into the locker room with your head down, just saying like no one saw that, right? I mean, that's bad.
Yeah, that was bad. You know what? And it just kind of, and it really sucks because there were a lot of people that had really high hopes for Justin Sternad, especially
I was
last
one of
year
them.
when he got hurt, and he had a really promising training camp, and he's another player who has his chance to shine. Unfortunately, it came at an unfortunate time with the injury to Josie Jewell, and he can't seem to take advantage of it. And it really sucks having to say that, because it kind of just makes him fall further and further down after the season in terms of depth chart. And hell, the Broncos could even decide to trade him or cut him, even if they kind of feel a need to do so, if they can find something better in the draft or in free agency or what have you. So
I think I've just found a new FA signing here in EJ. We are signing guys off the street now for our inside linebacking core. EJ has volunteered himself to step in. I think that's wonderful. Hopefully you're in the Denver area, and hopefully Peyton sees the comment here and gives you a shout.
Yeah.
We're signing guys left and right now.
And to answer your question, Glenn, I'm not turning on Justin Sternad. I just hope that he kind of puts this as a bad game type of mentality, because if this happens again going into the next couple of games, then you kind of really have to start questioning, who's really at fault. Is it the defensive coaching, or is it just, Sternad's gameplay, or the fact that he needs to have help from the secondary to come in and help him make a simple tackle? What have you. And that's an issue that we've had with even our former inside linebackers, Rich, is when they have to get a tackle on running backs or what have you, or on blitzes to get to the quarterback, they kind of seem to miss. So obviously that's not on coaching. That's an individual mistake, but that's something that needs to be cleared up, and that can be cleared up by the help of the coaching staff.
The last linebacker was with that mid-size as a mix between size and speed that really showed us that legit instinct and tackling ability was Denny Trevathan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I really, really wish he was still on our team. He really had those instincts that it looks like other guys are really lacking. So if you have a challenge in adjusting your angles, which it looks like Sternad is actually, that seems to be what his biggest issue is that he's coming at guys from odd angles, and they're able to run through him because he's not the largest guy and therefore not the strongest guy, as a direct correlation to that. And what you need from guys like that is better instincts. You need to have guys that can then instinctually line themselves up at the right angles to stop the forward momentum of the player that they're going up against. Sternad seems to be missing both. He's not a big guy, and he's missing the instincts. Now, I honestly and truly hope that those comments that I just made are dead wrong, and he comes out against the Washington football team and just thumps them, right? However, we have seen 2 games in a row where he has done very similar things in similar situations. He's either been bulldozed, he has been kind of just brushed out of the way. You cannot have that from your inside linebackers. You need the blend between speed, proper tackling angles, and then you end up with guys like Denny Trevathan, who frankly is sorely missed on our team right now.
Yeah, well, you know what? While I do appreciate everything that he did for us, I would have thought that maybe the Broncos would have tried to make a deal to kind of land like a Roquan Smith, because I mean they could get Danny Trevathan, but unfortunately Trevathan is up in age now. He's not the Trevathan that we had here in Denver 5-6 years ago, so he'd be better off as a signing as a free agent. At that, I would say I don't think he'd actually be worth trading for, because you could more than likely get lucky getting another, trying to find a diamond in the rough in the draft. But that's just basically my take on that. But that cannot happen again. There's no way that the Broncos defense can keep going forward and let. I mean, that's obviously a black eye on this season as it is. And as much as the Broncos try to move on into the next game type of mentality, it's really hard when you keep having these moments where it's just feels like a drag, And there has to be a leader in that locker room. Usually it's always a Von Miller, it's a Bradley Chubb or what have you. But there needs to be somebody to kind of, just pick up the optimism and, try to keep your heads up high and just rally the team. And that's something that you would probably expect out of your head coach. But Vic Fangio is so concerned about what the opposing team is doing in terms. I haven't seen him fired up as much as he was against. And I think I said this already. When the Ravens, when they ran it instead of taking a knee, that's the kind of energy and
right.
Passion we want to see out of our head coach. But to try to better the team, not worrying about what the hell the other team did at the very last play of the game. So he needs to change. And I know that sounds repetitive. We say it a lot on the show, but that's just what we as fans can only do, is we can only hope that he can change. Otherwise, hey, it's hit the bricks.
I just pulled up Bree's comment here. I mean, I completely agree. That's why I hedged my comment at the end of it. He is a young player for our team who is effectively playing his very first season in the NFL due to his injury last year. I mean, I completely agree. And 100%. That being said, there are certain things that you require and need out of your inside linebacker. So I hope I'm wrong. And I hope what I see for the remainder of this season out of Strnad is kind of that learning experience where you get those 1 or 2 games where you make some big mistakes. And I hope that he is the type of guy that can kind of look inwards, realize what he did wrong and kind of work towards correcting it. I do not expect it to be corrected fully this season, because I think that's just not a fair expectation of someone like Strnad. I think what you want to see is that small progression that we were all talking like with guys like Drew Lock as they were kind of going through the year. You just want to see little tweaks and elements of his game that improve over time. Maybe he breaks up a pass or two. Maybe he gets an interception. Maybe he's able to punch out a couple balls in the run game. Little things like that go a long way. And, you just hope you kind of start seeing that kind of progress out of it. The one thing I do want to get into a little bit, and I'm hoping we get some kind of feedback from the comments here, seem to be going pretty fast and furious now in the chat, which is awesome, is the interior defensive line. We kind of touched on it a little bit with Mike Purcell, but we really didn't go that deep into it. And I'm curious as to what everybody else thinks about it. We have been gashed pretty hard in terms of the run game these past 3 games, back to back to back. 4, really, if you want to go all the way back to kind of count all of our 4 losses. We've been hit pretty hard with running backs, just absolutely running amok all over us. So what do we think we all need to do to get better at stopping the run? And what options do you think we have available to us? One of the big concerns I have is just the interior defensive line getting pushed around by opposing offensive lines.
Mm-hmm. You know what? If this Browns game taught us anything, it's that whenever the Broncos seem to plug one hole, like another one just kind of seems to open. And the secondary had a decent game this past week. It wasn't the worst. It wasn't, giving up a giant play like they have the last 3 games. But they just need to kind of find their rhythm where one part of the defense doesn't struggle over the other. Same thing with the offense. If the offensive line struggles, then it's like if one part of the team suffers, why does it have to be a domino effect? Why does the other part have to suffer?
They're overcompensating.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah. But, one thing that Pat Shurmur's gotten away from is he's gotten away from the running game. If you know that if you're going to play Bridgewater, why are you forcing Bridgewater to throw so many times or to check down? If it's a 3rd down, why are you checking the ball down? I would much rather them try to run for a 1st down than, to check the ball, because I don't feel that the hit that wide receiver is going to take is worth it just to convert, just to get 1 yard, and you don't even get the conversion. So, the check down hasn't really been working for Bridgewater. And on the defense, it's just, trying to limit the damage that the offense is putting out there. So, the offense is started kind of regressing into, the offense that we've been used to the last couple of years. That's the idea we've started to see with, the punts and the defense going out there and just wearing out. And then, everybody just literally catching their breaths when we saw what happened to Von Miller I honestly thought Von Miller was done. That hit was just totally nasty. It was gruesome, but thankfully he was able to get up and walk away under his own power. As somebody stated in the chat, Von Miller is day to day, so that's very good news. And that just basically, that would have been like pretty much a death blow to that defense, because we're already without Bradley Chubb. That defense cannot be without Von Miller at the same time, because like I said, he is the closest they have to, some type of leadership, and to just trying to, get the team fired up and, rally them when they have a lead and just what have you. And if he would have went down and done for the season, that would have been, there's no trading for another Von Miller. That would have been just devastating for this team.
I'm not sure if everyone actually saw the replay of that.
It was pretty gruesome, man.
We all basically made a similar comment in our group chat, which was, "Oh no!" And I mean, I'll be honest, I thought he was done, because when I saw his knee, kind of like his whole, I actually thought he might have had another torn ACL.
Mm-hmm.
Because his whole knee was almost contorted and bent, kind of funky. And I truly thought that he was done. So the fact that the worst of it, at least the worst of it, which is kind of what they're claiming, is just an ankle issue, you have to say we're lucky.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. And, guys, as we get towards the 20-minute mark, we just have to kind of if it's one thing that Vic Fangio is not really doing, is just kind of trying to teach this team to learn from their mistakes. And it just seems that the Broncos just keep doing the exact same thing over the last 4 games, which is the Broncos falling behind, trying to play from behind, trying to come back from behind. And
can we pull up Bree's comment there?
Yeah.
And we're kind of getting deeper into the show, so I think it's important because we need to start talking about our upcoming game as well. I actually have a quick comment on this. What I love to hear comments and feedback from everybody on this is, in terms of morale, and we're talking about holes and bugs and kind of scheme issues and all that sort of thing. When Vic Fangio was brought into our team, he was a known commodity. He runs his defense. His defense is exactly what it is. You saw it in Chicago. We have a Chicago native here on the show, my co-host here. I mean, there's nobody who has seen Fangio's defense operate better than a 6'10" Mexican here. So you know what Fangio brings to the table. There's a reason why you brought him in as your head coach, is because he knows the defensive side of the ball. So my question to everybody here is, if you know what your head coach brings to the table in terms of defensive mindset, he requires certain personnel in order to run that defense. And, whether it be that kind of like clogger of the middle in that kind of center part of the field, which is what we saw originally when Purcell was brought in, which is why he kind of got that contract. And you also then need the speedy linebackers. So you mentioned Roquan Smith from Chicago as an example. So he's that speedy sideline to sideline linebacker. Well, who do we have that's that speedy sideline to sideline linebacker to fill that Roquan Smith role on our defense? So is this really a Fangio defensive issue, or is this the players and personnel that Fangio has been provided that really don't fit what he wants to run? And I will admit that this is a bit of a cart and a horse scenario, which is Fangio came in saying, I want to run this, and he was given something else, in my opinion. Now, on the flip side of that, Fangio is a veteran. He should know better, and he should pivot. Now, the problem is that we've had all these off seasons, and I don't think that's possible. So what do we think? Do we think that we should change kind of the way we run our defense in order to fit the people that we have on our team to maybe do better this season? Or do you think we just need to bite the bullet and move on?
You kind of froze there for a second, Rich. So I do think that I mean, obviously there were high hopes in terms of bringing the defense that Vic Fangio built with the Bears over to Denver.
Yeah.
And for the first two seasons, the first season, it kind of looked like it did. The second season, unfortunately, injuries devastated what could have been. And then this year, even though the injury bug has not been as consistent as it was last year or devastating, the names on paper have not, the gameplay anyway, has not translated over correctly into the field. And games that the Broncos should have easily won and not given up and all that good stuff has not happened. And the offense under Teddy Bridgewater, to me anyway, kind of feels like it took a step back, especially since Bridgewater's supposed to be the vet. He's supposed to be the guy. He's supposed to be the one that doesn't do what Drew Lock did in terms of, turnovers and
interceptions
and punts and whatnot. So that hasn't happened either. And all of these things need to be changed. They need to be addressed. And it all starts with coaching. And Vic Fangio isn't really doing his job in terms of trying to fix, because he's still calling the defense and he really shouldn't be. That's why he has Ed Donatel up in the booth. He really should be letting Ed Donatel call the defense and let Vic Fangio worry about 90% of coaching. And he just has to, like I said, if the fact that he's willing to go down with his coaching staff and, not admit when he's wrong and fire, even though it's his friend Pat Shurmur, really speaks volumes as to, it might be an honorable thing, Rich, but at the same time, this is a business. This is a team. This is work. It's not so much here to, to be buddies or what have you. So and right now it looks like all three of those guys could really be out of a job come the end of the season if things don't get better.
I agree. Now, with all of that being said, wrapping all that into a bow, I think it's time that we give everybody our Mile High Mountain picks.
Oh yeah. You ready for this?
For this game, I'm ready for it. So I think we need to go ahead and delve into the Mile High Mountain and go from there. Do you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Here we go, guys. Introducing our new segment. Well, our new recurring segment, the Mile High Mountain.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay.
Oh, I love it.
For those of you who don't know, before you go, Rich, the boss made that and he told us not to look at it until we were live. So, I was dying with anticipation trying to figure out what it was, and it was amazing. So shout out to the boss for making that really cool little highlight video. But Rich, your Mile High Mountain picks.
Well, it was a yodeler. That's spectacular. I mean, that's amazing. So I was under strict instructions to not view the video. I did follow those. Love the intro video.
Amazing.
Oh, that's amazing. So atop of my Mile High Mountain, I have Jonathan Cooper. I just really think that he showed what we all kind of saw in preseason, which is that burst off the line that Malik Reed doesn't have. And don't get me wrong, I think Malik Reed can be a great cog in terms of that rotational role. I just think that we saw from Jonathan Cooper what Malik Reed has not been able to provide us, which is that extra option, which is great. So he was atop my Mile High Mountain. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, if you go back and rewatch that Browns game, it was very difficult to select anyone else other than Jonathan Cooper for the Mile High Mountain because there was not much else in that game. My on the rise or on the ascent, heading up to the peak, was Courtney Sutton. I thought he had a pretty good game overall. He caught some great passes. He really tried to stretch out, and he caught that nice one-handed pass that Teddy threw, which I do have to admit was a very well-thrown ball, right on the outer shoulder there of Courtney Sutton. So good for Teddy, good for Courtland. I think overall Courtland had that kind of that, not quite the tier that you'd expect from someone like Courtney Sutton, but not too far off either. And he deserves to be on the ascent. The base camp still got lots of room to grow. Was our interior defensive line. I think against a backup offensive line, which had a lot of kind of second stringers in there, I think it is fair to assume as a Broncos fan that we should expect better, and we did not get it. And last but not least, my on the plane ride home, again for I don't know how many weeks now, is Pat Shurmur. I just think that his offensive game planning was uninspired. And really the only reason why the game even looked close on paper was because we had that late drive where we scored a touchdown. And if you look at the overall game, our offense was anemic, and that's being generous.
Yeah. Those are all very good picks, Rich. I'm not going to lie to you. So for me, guys, the top of my high mountain for me was Garrett Bowles. I got to give it up for him because even though he did get one flag for holding, going up against a guy like Myles Garrett, who's been wrecking offensive lines these last couple of weeks, was anything beyond amazing. And I'm pretty sure he's lucky to have avoided being named a tombstone on Myles Garrett front yard, as he's been doing for other quarterbacks. But to me, Garrett Bowles played an amazing game. He did exactly what he was supposed to do in terms of limiting and holding off Myles Garrett from wrecking the quarterback and, mounting up sacks and hits. And that's something that the offensive line as a whole over the last 3 or 4 weeks has kind of struggled in doing. So, props to him. For me, towards the, coming up in the summit, in the middle of the mountain is actually a tie between, you talked about Jonathan Cooper. I think his emergence is going to be amazing. I really do feel bad for Malik Reed because I kind of feel like Cooper might, if he has another great game like he does this coming week, he could step over Malik Reed's position in terms of, being the second rotation instead of third, especially when Bradley Chubb comes back. So while that would suck, I really want Cooper to kind of get to learn how to play the feel of the game and, just be that diamond in the rough that you and I have predicted he could be since the preseason. And on the other hand, Melvin Gordon, he did have a touchdown in that game. And, he when he stretches with the ball, I really get nervous because, and I was knock on wood.
Fumbling and bumbling?
Fumbling and bumbling, yes, sir. But so far, thank God, he has not done any of that. And hopefully he doesn't continue to do it for the remainder of the season because this could be his last year as a Bronco. I really don't see George Paton handing out another $16 million for 2 years to keep him in Denver. But even though he didn't rack up 100-something yards, that's not his fault. He's only running and doing what he's being told. At least he had a touchdown and he made himself sort of relevant again, especially in the fantasy world for those that have him as a starting running back.
At the bottom, I would say for Gordon, though, is he has been one of the few people that has been rather vocal about liking being with the Denver Broncos. I mean, when you look at the general comments about our team, he has come out vocally and said, I'm with the Broncos, and he's really kind of embracing his role with the Denver Broncos, which I think is rather refreshing. We haven't really heard that kind of stuff from very many people other than Von Miller and Melvin Gordon.
Agreed. And at the bottom of the summit is obviously, once again, Pat Shurmur. I really don't like the decision of putting in Teddy Bridgewater. I really thought that they should have went with Drew Lock. I mean, when you saw that interception, Teddy Bridgewater has gone, 6 games so far without trying to force the ball, maybe once or twice to where it could have been, but at least the ball was in the vicinity of the wide receiver. You know, in that play, it was completely underthrown into double coverage. It was a bad read, and it was a bad play altogether. And the fact that he still seems to get away from the running game really confuses the hell out of me. I kind of commend him on, learning what screen passes are, but when you seem to run 2 or 3 almost every single drive, you become really predictable, especially against Joe Woods, who's a former defensive coordinator with Denver. That didn't fare well either. And on the plane ride home, I'm just going to say Vic Fangio, because I really think that he, like I said earlier at the beginning of the show, guys, I just don't think that the accountability he said in his presser, it didn't sound sincere. It just sounded like he said it because it's what we want to hear. But until he starts making some moves and not relying on the GM to make moves for him, and we need to see something that drastic from him to say, hey, look, I want to save my job. I want to keep continuing being a head coach. And to me, when he fires Pat Shurmur, that's when I'll really start taking him for real, or he turns that defense around and they start, getting turnovers like we wanted them to since week 1. And that's my high mountain.
Awesome. The only thing I will say on the Teddy Bridgewater throw, I really do encourage everyone to go back and rewatch, if you can find out even a highlight reel of kind of where that throw was made. And NFL.com, I believe, actually has a highlight reel that includes that particular throw. They do zoom in on Teddy on that highlight reel as well. He really, really is favoring that front left ankle on that throw. And to your point, you made this early on in the podcast here, which is Drew probably should have been starting that game for that very reason. If you can't lean into a throw and really, put that extra oomph into that throw, you have no business being on a field in an NFL game. And that's an exact reason why you ended up with an interception that could have been a touchdown, that could have been a difference maker in the game in terms of that extra momentum early in the game. And of course, Shurmur then plays scared as a result of missing that and kind of goes almost to the extreme because that's what he does. And that was a big deal. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it. And I just wanted to kind of highlight that and say, I agree.
Very well so. And you know what, as we look forward into going into this next coming game, which Rich is going to lead us into, just to kind of end this segment, guys, if we learned one thing, it's that we can't take any single team for granted coming forward, just because they're injured, just because they don't have a head coach or what have you, that, the Broncos need to start taking these games a little bit more serious and just basically stop playing from behind and, get a lead, keep the lead, hold the lead, come out with a win.
So I'm just pouring myself some more maple syrup here, Mundungus. So thanks for that. But this is a brown ale that I'm drinking for today's pod. One of my favorite brews. And as we go into the Hot Five, we're going to be given the 5 things that the Washington football team needs to do to beat our Denver Broncos by Corey from On the Warpath.
And here we go, guys. The Hot 5.
What's up, everybody? My name is Corey Sanchez 405 from On the Warpath. Pleasure to be here to give you my top 5 things Washington needs to do to beat your Denver Broncos. And the first thing I can think of is quarterback Taylor Heinicke. He started in week 2. He came in for relief of Ryan Fitzpatrick. You all remember Ryan Fitzpatrick from that game against the Dolphins. I don't know what y'all call it nowadays, but somebody will correct me on it. But Taylor Heinicke needs to play within himself, not cause turnovers, and he has to learn where he should dive forward in situations like that. This red zone offense was terrible under him yesterday on Sunday against the Green Bay Packers. So that is my one thing. Taylor Heinicke has to play within himself. He has to have situational awareness. Number 2 point. Third down. Washington has been abysmal in the bottom quarter of the league. Third down on offense and defense. That has to stop this week. It has to stop against Denver. 25th on offense, 32nd in defense, giving up about 60% on the defensive side of the ball, and about and only getting converted about 34% of the time on offense. So that is number 2. The third down defense and offense has to get better there. On the third point that I want to make is the fact that this defense is not where it needs to be. We have seen it all season, and the fact that we have a cornerback in William Jackson III who did not play against Green Bay but has been flagged each game. So he's been flagged for 7 games that he's played in 6 accepted penalties. That has to be cut down. I know it's going to be a little bit harder with the wide receivers that the Broncos have, but if Washington is to win, he can't be penalized there. Another thing about Washington you're going to have to do at number 4, establish the run. Washington had a concerted effort to focus on the run against Green Bay, saw some success with that. J.D. McKissick is good in there. Antonio Gibson, running back who came out of Memphis last year's draft, has a fracture with his shin or hairline. Something is up with that shin, and it's showing that he is not up to par as he was in previous, like he was last year. And kind of towards the back end of the season, he was hurt. It's with turf toe. It just seems like it's one injury after another. Look out for undrafted rookie Jared Patterson to maybe play a role if Gibson cannot go, and J.D. McKissick is a good dual threat running back. He catches the ball, and he can run the ball very well from it. And the fifth thing is, y'all saw it on Sunday. If you go back and look at it, Washington was 0 for 4 in the red zone. You can't do that. You don't deserve to win ball games if you cannot convert in the red zone. That is key. Taylor Heineke, Scott Turner, they've got to get together, devise a game plan that is going to work and that can punch it in for them. If we can do that, we can win the game. So we go. Taylor Heineke, can't turn it over. Number 2, third down. You got to improve on third down. That is a key one right there. And then as the chips may fall, we will see how it is. But other than that, y'all, I hope you can come and check me out on the Warpath, Sanchez 405 on Twitter and Instagram. Love to continue the conversation there with you. And look, we still beat y'all in the Super Bowl, right? Yeah, anyway, check me out. All the love in the world, though, to you. And appreciate Rich and Company for having me on here. It is a pleasure. And go Burgundy, go to hell to the nameless football team. Appreciate you all. I'm out.
He just had to throw that Super Bowl win in our face, didn't he?
Yeah. So that was great. Thank you very much for Corey there from On the Warpath for joining us and giving us his hot 5 for what the Washington football team needs to beat our Denver Broncos. The one thing I will say from my review of the last 2 games of the Washington football team, particularly the game against Green Bay, was their offensive line was pretty good with the run game, and they were able to break out some of the running backs to kind of get those extra yards and whatnot. What concerns me is that that's also been a weakness of our interior defensive line in the last 4 games. And when you can start controlling that clock by running the ball on the opposing team, it really makes it difficult for you to win.
Yeah. Somebody asked a question about if the Broncos should try to make another trade before the deadline next week. And to kind of answer your question, I would probably say that question should be answered depending on what the Broncos do this coming Sunday. If the Broncos can get a win and go 4-4 and make it look like, hey, we might be down, but we're not out of it by any stretch of the imagination yet, then I do think that George Paton might go out and make a big trade before the deadline next week. But if the Broncos lose and they end up 3-5, then it's going to start to look less likely like, they should go out and make a trade if it doesn't look like the season can be salvaged, even though it would only still be week 9 and it would still be not early, but not even midseason yet at the same time. It just wouldn't look like the Broncos would be a contender, especially for the playoffs. So basically, as Bree says, for who though? I mean, there's a lot of positions that can be filled. I would probably say interior defensive line.
I agree.
Would probably be one of my choices because you already have the inside linebacker spots filled. I mean, gladly. I mean, I'll give you, they're not like huge names per se, but getting some bodies out there is better than what we had going into this past Thursday. So it would just kind of just be maybe try to take advantage of somebody who has a fire sale, going on. It could be the Jets, it could be the Texans, it could be the Jaguars. I mean, but specifically, you know what? I know I keep picking on the Bears a lot, but I would probably say, get like a veteran, get somebody like Akeem Nicks. I think Akeem Nicks in this defensive front would be a really big help, especially since he came from a Vic Fangio system. So, bringing in that familiarity would really help going forward in the season, Rich.
I actually agree with that as a starting point. I just wanted to thank Kevin Dandino. Thank you for joining us today. It is wonderful seeing you here in the pod. And, there's been a few other people joining us here. Dave Glassman as well. Thank you very much for joining us, Dave. I actually agree with that. You're looking for that interior center, that nose tackle / kind of like dead center guy. I hate to say it as a Purcell replacement, but you want someone to fill in for Purcell and see if they can push Purcell to kind of get back to form to where he was in previous years. You want the guy that can chew up one or two guys, preferably two, to kind of force the interior offensive line to focus in the middle, which then helps free up the outside, both the offensive guards and the offensive tackles, to then try to block one-on-one or even attempt to block two people, which never ends well. And that's what you're looking for on that defensive line front, to kind of what you pointed out there with Hakeem Nicks. Hakeem Nicks is also, if I'm not mistaken, he's already played with Vic Fangio and proven to be a known commodity in a Fangio defense, which I think would be a great fit.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? It was thanks to him that the Bears this past week against Tampa Bay started out strong, but unfortunately the offense it didn't pan out, and that's how you really weaken down any defense, and that's happened to Denver as well. When the defense spends out more time than they're supposed to, or put in unfortunate positions to try to limit the damage that the offense gave up. But going into this Washington game, guys, I do believe that the secondary should be on the bounce, kind of bouncing back in terms of coming back up to fruition. And I say that because Ronald Darby came from that system. So if there's anybody who knows how that team is run, especially with Taylor Heineke, it would be him. You know, Taylor Heineke did start when the Washington football team made it to the playoffs, and even though it was against Tom Brady, it was a tall task, but he was there. If this was Ryan Fitzpatrick, I probably wouldn't maybe go that far, but I would expect to see a decent to a really good game from Darby, especially because we were all expecting him to be better last week. And even though he didn't get burned or give up any huge plays, I don't think that he played to his full potential, especially since he got a really big contract from Denver this season.
Well, Darby got hurt, and I think he was probably rushed back a little bit, in part because I think he had a chat with probably Vic Fangio, or even both Fangio and Donatel, to say, "You are our best cornerback. Get back on the field, please." And I think Darby was probably rushed back a little bit sooner than was probably, maybe recommended. I hope that what we've seen with Darby is that he has been stepped in enough now, and then given that extra break as a result of us going kind of from Thursday to Sunday, where we're going to start seeing the Darby of old. And he's a good cornerback. I mean, he is. Let's put it this way. Darby is light years ahead of what we've seen out of Fuller. And Fuller, I think we all had much, much higher expectations of when he came into Denver. He obviously was cut by the Bears. And I thought personally, I can only speak for me, and I'll obviously let you kind of jump in here and kind of correct if you're of a differing opinion. But I expected far more out of Fuller, given the fact that he was from a Fangio system. And it's clear that that's one of the main reasons why he came into Denver, was to basically show that he still has it, and he can earn that next contract. And if but anything, I would argue that he's probably done himself a disservice, because he has fallen off compared to where he was with Fangio in Chicago. But as far as Darby goes, I think he was a pretty good pickup for us, and I think he'll be here for most of his contract that we signed him for. He's shown to have that burst that we were all hoping that a cornerback would have, and he's been able to cover guys a lot better than our other cornerbacks that we have on the roster, with the exception of our number one cornerback on our team, who has almost filled in for that Chris Harris Jr. role, which is Bryce Callahan, who has easily been our best cornerback on our roster, and it is not even close.
Yeah, obviously I was part of the hype when we when we've read the news that, Kyle Fuller got signed to a contract in Denver, even though it was only 1 year. It was basically a prove it contract, Rich. And, having, Bryce Callahan on one side and Kyle Fuller on the other, it was great just seeing it on paper, and just the idea of, bringing back what they did in 2018, bringing it to Denver and, reigniting that passion in Broncos country. And it didn't happen. I mean, Bryce Callahan hasn't had the same year as last year, obviously, but at least he's not injured and he's not getting burned either. So his gameplay could be better, but it's decent at the moment. Whereas Kyle Fuller, I mean, we've seen it almost looks like he's either caught out of coverage or he's misreading plays, or I mean, I don't know. It almost makes you want to believe that he's playing with some sort of injury that, the Broncos aren't letting he has. But when you see the tape, it doesn't look like he's playing in that sort of way. So you can't even go and say that. And I don't think the Broncos will find a suitor, because obviously everybody in the NFL sees what we see, and he doesn't look like somebody, unless it was like for a team that absolutely needed depth, like a Tampa Bay maybe. But I don't even think somebody like Todd Bowles could help a guy like Kyle Fuller out. But then again, I could be wrong, because Todd Bowles isn't the head coach; he's the defensive coordinator. So, but if the Broncos are able to move Kyle Fuller before the trade deadline and get a good, maybe a second, third rounder around there, I think that's a win situation, even though the Broncos are on the hook for his contract for the remainder of the year. And if they don't, hopefully Kyle Fuller plays better than he has, and I just don't see him getting another contract with Denver next year, especially if Vic Fangio is out the door.
You're not getting anything more than a 6th or 7th round pick, maybe a 5th if you're lucky for Kyle Fuller. He has not proven himself to be better than that. And as others have commented to me on Twitter with regards to Von Miller has proven to be pretty much only a modest step down from where he was at a peak this year. And most people were trying to tell me that he's basically in the 3rd to 4th round pick range. Kyle Fuller has been a substantive drop off compared to the relative value of the outside linebacker versus the cornerback position. So I would imagine he's probably between a 6th and the 7th round pick. And it would probably be from a team that would want a veteran kind of depth guy on their roster as they enter in the playoffs in case they have injuries. So he might be better than, say, like that rookie that might be kicking on their roster. They could probably stash away on their practice squad. I could see something like that happening. Mm-hmm. There'd be a few teams that might kind of enter my mind that might fit into that mold. But for Denver Broncos, the one thing that has been quite interesting to me is that we have been buyers, not sellers. So it's almost like there's an attempt to be a relevant team by the Denver Broncos, because we started off so strong and then have kind of finished off so weak as of late. So it does interest me a little bit, and I'm both interested and concerned almost at the same time in the fact that we've brought in inside linebacker help, which I think is much needed because we've had so many injuries at that position. But we haven't brought in, as you mentioned, someone like Akeem Nicks or someone else in that interior defensive line role, or maybe even a defensive end from another team that might be able to spell someone like a Draymond Jones or a Shelby Harris in terms of getting pressure up the middle of the team. And I say pressure, I don't mean sacks. I mean collapsing the pocket. So the one problem that we've really had in our team coming in, particularly to the Washington football team week here, is we've seen 3 to 4 consecutive weeks of we haven't collapsed that interior of the pocket for opposing quarterbacks. We've allowed guys like Derek Carr and others to have free throwing on our secondary and being able to kind of slice and dice us a little bit and allow that extra 1 or 2 seconds of time to throw the ball, which is basically a nail on the coffin in the NFL level. So we need that interior line pressure to throw the quarterbacks off their game, even if it's just more regularly, not even consistently, just more regularly, in order to allow our back end of our defense to properly readjust and prevent these throws that we're seeing on us. That makes all the difference in the world. You actually had Von Miller, of all people, who credited guys like Malik Reed and Derek Wolfe and even Sylvester Williams in the Super Bowl 50 year for that interior defensive line push that they got. And that helped him and DeMarcus Ware really chew up the outside of the opposing offensive lines and get those sacks.
Yeah, and as we get close to the end of the show here, Rich, let me just say that I think the one thing that the Broncos defense needs to worry about is Terry McLaurin, aside from Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson has been questionable these last couple of weeks. He hasn't been that explosive running back he has last year. So hopefully the Broncos interior line, especially with their new additions, can take advantage of that. But Terry McLaurin has been really, really good for the Washington football team. And if they can basically get him covered and make Taylor Heineke uncomfortable in the pocket, I think that the Broncos defense will have a really good day at the office. Von Miller coming back kind of worries me a little bit, especially if he's day to day. So hopefully they reevaluate him carefully and that they don't do something where they rush him back, and that the Broncos front office learned from their, what happened with Bradley Chubb.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So if he needs to take a game away, I think that Jonathan Cooper would be a suitable replacement for a day to get the Broncos team ready for the following game, because I believe that matchup is going to be a lot tougher than this one. But we'll get into that topic next week's show. But just basically, the Broncos just have to play time of possession. And, that obviously that Washington defensive line, they haven't lived up to par either. But hopefully they don't decide to start getting better this week against our offensive line. And I have faith in Garrett Bowles. And, Bobby Massey, he hasn't been the worst right tackle in the league so far, but he hasn't been the best either. And our interior offensive line they'll have their work cut out for them. So hopefully Teddy Bridgewater's in a better position in terms of, health and starting wise going into this game, and just basically not forcing the ball when he doesn't need to, and being the guy that we so loved and admired those first 3 games, and not being either a check down Charlie always, or just hey, throw the ball and hopefully somebody catches it in the end zone.
I like to see Shurmur go back to the preseason stuff of the flanking tight ends on either side of the offensive tackle. I'd like to see us try to run the ball more by bouncing Javonte both inside and outside, emphasis on the last part as well, where, we have spent far too much time running Javonte Williams up the gut, which is great. He's done fairly well for us. He's gotten some pretty good yards per carry, which is great. But the problem is that our interior defensive line has really struggled with blocking the opposing interior defensive linemen of other teams. So when you have Javonte Williams forcing guys to kind of go more outside and spend more time on the outside blocking the run, you're able to spread out that interior defensive line because they have to, not because they want to, because they have to stop 5, 6, 7 yards of carry from happening with Javonte Williams, who's proven he can be that guy. So what I would like to see from the Denver Broncos is Pat Shurmur put his pride aside, stop these 3 wide receiver sets more. He doesn't mean he has to stop it altogether. He's got to rebalance the offense, go for more 2 tight end sets with the tight ends flanking both tackles from a blocking perspective. It looks like Albert O might be back this week, which might help that to be a reality. So you can end up with kind of a Noah Fant, Albert O, or a Albert O and Eric Saubert, who are both excellent. Albert O and Eric Saubert are incredible blockers at the tight end position. And if we can get back to something like that, I think we have a chance, because then we can start controlling time of possession with running the ball.
Yeah. And guys, unfortunately, we are out of time, and that's going to have to do us for us tonight. Richie and I would like to thank everybody in the chat tonight. Kevin, Bree, my cousin Ivan, the boss Mundungus, Johnny, Avatar, everybody. Thank you guys so much. Unfortunately, Vic, Landon, I can't remember everybody's name, but thank you guys so much for watching. And let me just recap for you guys. If you like what you saw today's show, please make sure you hit that thumbs up button on Facebook, hit that subscribe button so you get live notifications on YouTube whenever we go live. And remember that the Broncos Talk podcast goes live every single Tuesday at 7654 with myself and Richie.
If I can just interject, there's also a lot of people that join us after the fact that are not able to catch us live. For anyone that does that, please give us a comment and let us know that you've joined us. We very much appreciate all of you, even though you're not able to join us live in the chat during our shows. We like to recognize you as well. So thank you very much for coming in even after the fact.
Yes, very well said, my friend. And also on Thursdays, make sure you catch the flagship show, the MHRT podcast with myself, the Boss Mundungus, the Glenn Hauser, who you saw in the chat today, and also my high five, Mr. Boggins himself. And on Fridays, make sure you don't miss the Nothing Rhymes With podcast with our good friends Johnny and Isaiah. And who knows, Richie might make a guest appearance there one day. And also make sure you don't miss The Neighborhood, which is the brand new pregame show that airs just before every single Broncos game. And there's always special guests. So make sure you guys tune in and get hyped up before every single Broncos game with the MHRT crew. So with that being said, Rich, before we go, we have to do everybody's favorite part of the show, the My High Five. Rich, are you ready?
I'm good to go.
Here we go, folks. My High Five! Woo! Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good night. We will see you next week. And as always, go
Broncos.
Hasta luego.